Okay, so today I'm going to talk about passwordless authentication with using OIDC. So here's a quick run through of what we're going to cover. So a quick primer, a demo, and then we'll go into some of the more curly things, Graph API, token timeouts, and how to approach security or increase security. Second demo, and then we'll talk about some advanced scenarios and some future capabilities coming from the Entra team. And if you've got time, hopefully at the end, a little bootstrap magic. So let's get started. Let's get straight into it. So OIDC or OpenID Connect, what's it all about? It's about a means of authenticating or doing deployments to Azure without having to worry about storing client secrets or certificates. So in the service principal approach, you've got a secret that you need to persist somewhere. That could be, so maybe you put it in your key vault or whatever, but anyway, that client secret needs to be stored somewhere, needs to be stored in actions, maybe in a secret in actions, needs to be rotated. Obviously, if you forget to rotate it, then your deployments will stop working. So OIDC simplifies things by exchanging short-lived tokens for access tokens. So instead of you having to store a secret or worry about rotating a secret, you request an access token, and it's a short-lived 5-minute constantly reissued token. So supports all the key Terraform providers like Azure RM, Azure API, Azure AD, and you can also use its mechanism to authenticate using Entra authentication to your remote state in your blob storage. So the key thing is you don't have to worry about secrets, storing secrets, and rotating them. So how does it work? Well, how do you establish trust? Well, there's 3 components to OIDC, and there's the issuer, the audience, and the subject. So the issuer is basically the provider which will vouch for the certificate. So in this case, it's GitHub Actions, and GitHub Actions has got a well-known URL that you see in small print there, tokens to actions. The second piece, the audience, is who is the token intended for. So when you're doing an Azure deployment, it's this well-known endpoint there, the Entra endpoint for Azure. So that's where the token is going to go to. And the final piece of information is the subject. The subject is what triggered the token. So in this case, if you're deploying from the GitHub repo, it's going to be the repository, and either an environment within that repository, GitHub environment, we'll get to what that is in a minute, or a branch, or a tag, or a PR. So it's the who issued it, who is it intended for, and what actually triggered the process. There's a couple ways to do OIDC in Azure. So there's the enterprise app approach, which I'm calling the classic way. And if you look at the GitHub documentation, I think this is the way they walk you through by default. It requires Entra ID permissions, yeah, it's the way which I think most people are familiar with. So I'm going to focus on a newer way, which is using managed identities. And the benefit to that is you can use it just using Azure only items. So if you lack permission to create applications inside Entra, it's really useful. And yeah, so it looks a bit like you see on the right-hand side, but I'll show you it live in a second. Cool. So let's switch to showing my screen. Hopefully this works. Cool. So just here we've got the Azure portal. I've got just using one side of the screen at the moment because something else is going to pop up on the other side in a minute. So this is just a basic resource group inside here. Let me just make it slightly larger. And it's got a key vault, it's got the managed identity and the storage account that I'm using for remote state. So let's look at the managed identity. Inside the managed identity, so this is pretty standard stuff. It's just a user time managed identity. We've got this federated credentials component, and this is the thing which basically interacts with GitHub. So if you're going to create a new one, I'm just going to walk through the process of how you make one. you come and say you've made your managed identity, you come into federated credentials, select the scenario here, and then you've got 3 things to fill in: your organization, repo, and then entity. And this is the point I'm going to bring up the other half of the screen so we can see where it's gone. There we go. So here's the repository that we're going to use to deploy from. So you've got the organization, which in this case is Koalaka. You've got the repo name, which I'm going to use as OIDC demo. Demo. And then the entity. And this is where you've got your 4 choices, of environment, branch, pull, request, and tag. And I think environment and branch is probably the 2 that I see the most. We're going to go with environment just so I can explain what it is. And then this is kind of an arbitrary thing, and I'll show you what this ties to in a minute. So I'm just going to call it dev plan for now. And the federated credentials, well, that can be whatever you want. I usually call it fed and then the name of the credential, but I'm too lazy to type that, so I'm just going to type fed Bob, just so you see what that looks like. And then we'll create that, and then we've got this extra thing here, this extra federated credential. So that's the process that you use to create it. I'm just going to delete it because we're going to use the other 2. So then what does that look like from the perspective of GitHub? So let's come over to the GitHub side and make it slightly bigger. So if we come into, oh, hang on, I need to switch browsers, apologies. Come into GitHub and go to settings. And then go down to environments. Here you see we've got a couple of environments set up. So we've got a plan and an apply environment configured. So you might ask why. Well, we'll come to the why in a minute. But if you look at the plan here, this is what we're going to use basically to do the deployment. And inside the environment, you set up the 3 secrets that you need to do OIDC, and they are your tenant ID, your subscription ID, and the client ID. The client ID corresponds to the client ID of the managed identity. So that's the client ID that you see just here when it loads. It goes slow. So while that's loading in the background, so it's those are the 3 things that you need to set. And then in terms of how do you use that within your deployment, let's have a look at the workflow. So I'm using workflow dispatch just so I can call this interactively. And these permissions here are key. So the ID token write basically allows GitHub to be to refresh the token. Remember, these are short-lived tokens, so they need to be periodically refreshed, and so that permission is needed for that. And then the actual deployment stage itself is just standard Terraform. So you check out the code, you set up Terraform, so 2 standard actions there. The login to Azure, this is the key thing, which is doing the OIDC. So you see we're passing in those 3 bits of information: the client ID of the managed identity, the tenant ID, and the subscription ID, and they come from the secrets from the environment that we just defined. And then there's this special environment variable there that's kind of signals we're going to use OIDC. And this final flag is, if you're not familiar, that's basically the way that you get your deployment to authenticate to the backend using Entra. So to the storage account where your TF data, you need that flag there. And then we just do, after that point, it's just standard stuff. So it's init, plan, and so forth. So you'll see at the top, there's this environment there. In this case, the environment is called the name of the environment. So it could be dev, test, prod, it could be whatever you want really, but that's what I'm using. And then it suffixes it with IAC plan. And if you remember from the settings inside the environment, corresponds to what's set there. So into environments. So you've got plan there and apply there. And in the apply stage, you're using the same thing. It's the name of the environment, -IAC, -apply. So when we come to do a deployment, just going to show you one that I've done earlier, just for the sake of expediency. So you see this login to Azure step here. If it's working successfully, then you should see something like this. So you see attempting Azure CLI by using OIDC. And if it's successful, then that happens. And then after that point, it's the same as any other deployment, same as normal. Cool. So I'm just going to switch back to my slides if it lets me. Right. So a couple pointers on securing OIDC. As you saw, these are basically connected into GitHub environments, or at least that's one way to do it. So when you do so, it's quite important to make sure that you've got approvals, especially on your key environments. So attached to your environment, you can add a reviewer, as you sort of see in the diagram, and I'm going to show you in the GitHub portal in a bit as well. And the other key thing that you can do to secure your OIDC workflows is just branch protection. So you create a branch protection on your main branch or your default branch, and make sure that's a certain number of reviewers as required by your company. It has been completed before a workflow can be triggered from that branch. So that's one. There's a couple ways to basically improve the security of OIDC. And now we'll just sort of get onto some of the challenges. So with OIDC, when you want to interact with the Graph API, you have to use PowerShell. So managed identity, you can't actually assign Graph APIs directly to it via the Azure portal, and again, I'll show you that in the portal in a second. But you can do so via Graph API, either via PowerShell or any other mechanism. You do need to be using the Azure AD provider version greater than 2.23. And there's a link at the bottom to a GIST, which basically is the script that you see on the right-hand side. And I'm going to walk through that with you in a minute as well. So switch back again. So what I'll do is I'll actually trigger a deployment. Live demo, what could possibly go wrong? Yeah, that'll do. So we'll just do run. And while that's busy running in the background, we're just going to switch over to the actions again. Sorry, the settings again. And I'll just show you those settings that we was talking about. So starting with the environment. So the reviewers on the environment. If you come here, remember we had the two. So I said there's a reason for having two, and you'll see on the second one there's two protection rules there. There's no protection rules on the plan. So what this means is that when you're doing a PR, you can call this plan. So at the moment we're triggering them manually, but you can call that plan on your PR, and you can be confident that it's going to work before you conduct reviews and so forth. When you want to do an apply, then your workflow basically references this environment instead. And there you can have up to 5 reviewers, and they can be either individuals, as you see here, it's just me, or you can add teams instead. Obviously, in a production environment, you'd prevent self-review, and then you can option either allow administrators to bypass these rules or not with that tick box there. So that's environment deployment protection rules. And then the second thing I talked about was branch protection. Now, that used to be underneath branches here, and it's kind of moved, so you can still use the classic branch protection, but the new ways to use branch rule sets. And if you click that button, it basically takes you to the location under here, and then takes you through the process of creating a new branch rule set. I've got one already made, just again for expediency. And so you can call it whatever you like. It can be active or disabled. That's pretty self-explanatory. I'd normally target the default branch, which you come down here, and you just say include default branch, and that basically means your main branch, whatever you call it, master or main. And then scroll down, Again, in a more formal setting, some of these would be ticked, but I just want to focus on this require a pull request setting there. You can set a number of required approvals, and if you're all by your lonesome, then it's got to be just you and yourself, so that can be 0. That's perfectly fine. The cool thing about doing this, even if you are working on your own, is that you can then, if you're licensed for Copilot, you can actually request a pull request from Copilot, and then it'll fill in a description of also what the changes are and identify if there's any bugs that it finds. So it's really handy, even if you're working by yourself, to use this process, because you can then use the Copilot feedback approach. The other thing that you often see is this tick box here, where it basically says, look, you can't be the person who pushes the change, can't be the person who reviews it. But again, when you're working by yourself, you don't have a choice. So there's a whole number of options there that you can use to basically secure your main branch. Cool. Let's see how that deployment is doing. Oops. Just leave that. Okay, so we've got to the point where we've kicked off the deployment, and this is the experience that you see. If you come in, it's now waiting for an approval. You can do it from here. Also, if you happen to land on the apply workflow, you can see you've got the same thing here. You can click the link. Those two places basically come to the same location here. You can tick that box and then approve and deploy, and then off it goes. It's a demonstration of a couple ways to secure OIDC. Let's see if I can switch back to slides. Come on. Or maybe you're going to watch the demo because I can't get to the thing to switch back to the slides. Come on, switch. Boom. Right, okay. So something to be aware of when using OIDC is token timeouts. If you recall, the token is short-lived. It lasts for 5 minutes by design. So when you do a Terraform init, so if you use the CLI approach as opposed to some of the built-in tasks, then the token does get cached inside the plan file. So if there's a long period between the init and the apply, you can hit a situation where the token has already expired. So one obvious way to do that is to do just to redo the init during the apply stage. That's kind of that's just one way around it. The built-in tasks, so the Terraform sort of tasks also manage this process for you as well. So in GitHub, the key thing to do is to make sure that you're using the ARM _use OIDC setting, and that ensures that the actions will refresh the token when required. It used to be a bit of an obstacle in DevOps. I know the session isn't about DevOps, but just recently, in the last week, I think it was announced that this ID token refresh is now available in the Terraform tasks v5 components in AZ DevOps, and there's a link at the bottom which talks about how you make that work. So thank you, Marcel. Now, just to close, I'm going to talk about a couple advanced scenarios. I'm not going to demo these because these are quite complicated, but just to give an illustration of what capability is available, you can change the subject of the OIDC. So by default, you remember it's the name of the repo and org, and then either environment, branch, tag, or pull request. You can instead use a different subject. So in this example, I'm using what's called the job workflow reference. And what that is that if you're using reusable workflows, it'll point to that. So why might that be useful? Well, perhaps you've got some IAC, which includes some vending code. And you want to have the vending code visible to the application, but you don't want the application teams able to call into your sub-vending logic, because that's obviously a very highly privileged operation. You can do all sorts of things to your hub, potentially. So it's something that you want to keep secure. So you can use this approach where you can have the code visible, you can have it call a pipeline, which is in another repository, which is owned by a different team. And then the actual the components of what makes up vending is visible to the application team. So if they want to make changes, they can raise PRs and so forth. But again, the environment approval, just like you saw with this more simpler scenario, the environment approval can be another team to make sure that it gets appropriately reviewed. So that's one potential advanced scenario, and there's some details on how you do that on the right-hand side. Another scenario which is still currently in preview, one to watch out for, is something called flexible claims. So in the examples which I showed, the subject was basically a string. You couldn't do much sort of cleverness around that. This new feature in preview adds a new property called claims matching expression. I will call out, it's not yet supported by Terraform providers or AZCLI or PowerShell, so it's more of a heads up, this is coming announcement. And what you can do is what you see on the right-hand side, you can sort of use this language in ways to say, I'm saying the subject in this example has to be this, which is kind of what we've got already. And we can say that the job workflow ref, i.e. the calling repository, the remote repository, has to match that. So it's kind of a more advanced way of specifying where workflows have to come from, where they have to originate from. And with that, that's me almost done. Just a little teaser to come. So if you're interested in those advanced scenarios, which I haven't had a chance to cover today, then please follow me on LinkedIn. I'm going to do a session on the vending solution, hopefully in the next short while. And what I'd like to close with is just a little demo of AZ Bootstrap, which is hot off the press. This is the first time it's been seen in public. So what is AZ Bootstrap? It's a PowerShell module that helps you bootstrap all the things that I just talked about. So you could think of it as a companion to AZD, and you can basically use it to specify a repository, and it will set things up for you. So creates a new repository from GitHub template, clones it locally, does all the various things you just saw in Azure, does all the various things that you just saw in GitHub, and now you're ready to go. And it's really simple to use. You just need to specify the template that you want to call, the target, and the location. So let's just do it. Let's just see what happens. What could go wrong? Let's do it. So we're going to create a repo. We'll call it Global Azure. And off we go. So the first thing it does, so you need to have the GitHub client on your machine. You need to have the AZ client available. So check to make sure those are both there. And then it'll go off and we'll see if we manage to get this to run. Cool, so it's connecting to my subscription. Those are not my real tenant IDs and sub IDs. Sorry to disappoint. They're just hard-coded strings I put in for the demo. Now we're going to clone the repository that we've asked for here. So this is the template that we're going to make a copy of, and it's going to go in a subfolder of where you currently are. So it's going to go in demos/global Azure. It's going to create a resource group. While this is busy running in the background, I'm just going to let's just see if we can bring it up inside GitHub as well, so you can see the stuff happening. So it's github.com/koalaka. What do I call it? Call it global/Azure, so it should be there by now. So you can see it's been cloned from the template. What's happening in the background? So it's making the managed identity at the moment. So if we start hop into Azure, we should see that going on. How are we cracking? I don't think we're quite going to finish this in time, so I'm just going to switch to showing what it looks like again from the recording that I made earlier, just because it's going to take a bit too long to run. So let's go to the top again. So here you see the same process running there. So you see cloning the repository, creating the resource group, creating the managed identity. Then it signs the permissions, so it signs contributor and RBAC admin. Creates the federated credentials that you saw before, creates the secrets, creates the environments, and adds the reviewer. And all you need to specify is the repository you want to clone from and the location you want it sent to. I think that's me with that.
Well, nice one. That's interesting. I like the AZ Bootstrap. What's the name of the open source repository?
It is. It's just on the. If you want to just switch back to my slides, if I can.
Let's bring it down.
It's AZ. Yeah. Just at the bottom there. So AZ Bootstrap. Yeah. So Qualica / AZ Bootstrap.
Oh, that's interesting. I'm going to be exploring still. We don't have like questions. I really like your approach. I've been doing that like currently on current engagements. Yeah, so that session was like pretty good. I learned from it. Well, thanks again, Stu. I appreciate like your time. You coming here this Saturday and sharing with us.
It was a pleasure, and thank you for inviting me, Marcel. It was, yeah, greatly appreciate it, and I hope everyone got something from it.